The Australian Financial Review.
Last week, Anthony Albanese reached an important milestone. He went past Paul Keating to become Labor's third longest serving Prime Minister. In just under 3 months, he'll move past Ben Chifley. And should he take Labor to the next election in May 2028, he'll push past Bob Hawke. While this show of stability should be a political triumph, right now it's far from smooth sailing.
A federal cabinet tussle over migration policy has led to the Home Affairs Minister cancelling a major speech.
It was the same episode in which he made his now infamous remarks about Kylie Minogue.
Prime Minister denies these gestures were intentionally rude.
Some MPs say that the gambling changes simply don't go far enough.
Voters are threatening to walk away from the major parties and barely anyone thinks they're better off.
Poor polling numbers, an emotional debate over gambling reforms, and a string of prime ministerial gaffes have put pressure on the government.
In isolation, these things are fine, but when you got 2, 3 or 4 or 5 of them, it becomes a problem. And I'll guarantee you there will be ads come election time with these lists on it.
Welcome to The Fin. I'm Lisa Murray. This week, political editor Phillip Coorey on the government's bet on gambling reform, the problem with brand Albo, and why the melon incident is no joke. It's Thursday, August 20. Hi Phil, thanks for coming back on the podcast.
Always a pleasure, Lisa.
And in a busy sitting week, we appreciate it. Phil, Albanese is now Labor's third longest serving Prime Minister, which is a big feat after a decade of instability. But he's not looking overly comfortable right now. What's going wrong?
Oh, look, they're just in the middle of their second term, Lisa, so it's not unusual for a government to be struggling a bit. But I think it's just overall it's suffering from about our 5th year now of high inflation, to which it is contributing with its high spending. But I think it's just, if you overlay everything that's going on at the moment, there's just a lot of unhappiness with politics because of just this constant battle with the cost of living and housing affordability and stuff like that, which never seems to get better. And we're now seeing that just sort of reflected in the polls, entrenched in the polls, if you like. Our latest poll, the one we do with the Redbridge Group and Accent Research, that was a few weeks ago, had Labor's primary back at 29%. Their primary vote at the federal election was 34.6%, and that was deemed really low. And it was only because they managed to do so well with harvesting preferences that they pushed that up to that near record 94 seats. But it's been around sort of 29, 28, 30 since the budget, Lisa.
Yeah.
And it just seems to be stuck there. While the coalition's lost a ton of votes to One Nation, you know, they're down around 2022 from 32 at the election. You know, Labor's lost about 5 points to One Nation, and that's proving stubbornly hard to get back. But I think what's also concerning is the Prime Minister's own popularity is pretty bad. So if you go back to last term, if you just indulge me, he sort of fell off a cliff in terms of both the Labor vote and his approval rating after The Voice. People really rejected The Voice. But it didn't damage him materially because he actually believed in The Voice. So what they call brand Albo wasn't damaged. You know, people said, okay, you went down fighting for something you believed in. So it didn't damage him. I think this time he's back to similar low levels of unpopularity, what we call a net negative. That's your positive favourability rating minus your unfavourability rating. And he's at minus 19. And Peter Dutton was at minus 20.
Yeah, okay.
A week before the last election. And this time, you know, the Prime Minister's integrity is in trouble. It took a really big hit after the Bondi massacre. People just really took that out on him. We saw it sort of jump back up again to around minus 10, which is pretty respectable for a mid-term, second-term Prime Minister. And that was on the back of their efforts to secure fuel after Trump started that war against Iran. They did a very good job, and they continue to do a very good job on fuel. But then the May budget came along and all those broken promises, and it just went back to minus 19, minus 20. And it's sat there ever since. And it's just proving incredibly stubborn. And he had a bad couple of weeks on the so-called melons gaffe. And I think a lot of that was self-inflicted, his inability just to accept he'd done something really silly and apologise and sort of doubled down instead. And so they're just sort of struggling a bit. And then we've got all this sort of legislation before the Parliament. And yeah, it's just a tough environment at the moment.
Phil, you mentioned the legislation this week. Let's start by talking about gambling reform. A 2-day Senate inquiry in the lead-up to the legislation heard really disturbing evidence of problem gamblers being offered drugs, sex and other inducements to keep on betting. It has been an emotional debate. What came out of that hearing, and did it have an impact on the government's final package of reforms?
To answer the second question first, Lisa, yes, it did. It pushed them to go a bit further than they really wanted to go.
Changes have been made to the reforms, including a new register allowing Australians to opt out of gambling ads on digital platforms.
This has been going on for almost 3 years now, this push to crack down really hard on gambling. And the government had sort of come to a position before the winter break. When Parliament last sat in June, the Prime Minister basically said it's a take it or leave it proposition.
And the Parliament should vote for it. If they don't, then you do have the option of the status quo.
It's not a big issue out there in the public. It doesn't rate. No one comes up to a backbencher and says, oh, you've got to do something about gambling ads, unless, you're a victim of it or you know someone who is. So it doesn't have that sort of broader political urgency to it.
Some of Australia's biggest sports betting agencies have been hauled before Parliament.
Going into that hearing, Labor didn't plan to do anything on inducements.
Accused of providing problem gamblers with drugs and booze to entice them to keep betting.
Tim Costello's always been red hot on this.
He was doing turnover of more than $20 million a month.
And he spoke about a young man who'd been funded for travel and escorts.
They were offering him escorts, drugs, whatever he wanted.
Claimed he got drugs from Sportsbet and TAB, which they vehemently denied. But probably the most resonant thing came from the former rugby league player, NRL player Luke Bateman.
I'm here because I've experienced firsthand the destruction that gambling harm causes.
He was horribly addicted to gambling and sort of blew everything he had on it. He spoke about as a 23-year-old he was flown around the country to attend race days. And
if the RP manager would offer you, hey mate, what drugs do you want?
Given tickets to key events.
Do you want a couple of bags?
Applied with liquor and drugs.
I was out in this room doing drugs with all of them. This is like the CEO, the founders.
And this was described as commonplace. Now, if those allegations are in fact true, they were disputed, I must say, by some of the big betting companies, but it did hang a lantern over the level of inducements that are also offered that are legal, paying of commissions and free tickets to race days and other marquee events and plying people with liquor and all these sorts of things. So the coalition, to its credit, they get a bit of a hard time, but it was actually under Peter Dutton. They were the first ones to raise this and want to go pretty hard on gambling. So they've never needed any encouragement. And Simon Kennedy, who's the member for Cook, he's quite an impressive talent, and he's been hot on this, and I think he sort of led the debate inside his party. And they wanted something done on inducements. The original legislation Labor was going to put to the Parliament didn't touch inducements. So what we saw in the wake of those Senate hearings was a discussion between Labor and the coalition, and Labor's agreed to go further and look at inducements. So it's not huge. It hadn't gone as far on inducements as, say, the Greens and Tim Costello as others would like, but it's been hanging around. It needs to have a line drawn under it, and the government's just very keen to draw a line under it.
And Phil, there was a lot of lobbying in the lead up to the legislation. The sporting codes, the gambling companies, the broadcasters.
Let's declare an interest here. We work for the Financial Review. We're owned by Nine Media. Channel 9 makes a fair bit of dough out of gambling. We broadcast the rugby league, amongst other things.
We do, that's right. Broadcasters like Nine benefit from the advertising. Sporting codes also stand to lose money if there are less ads. Albanese is an NRL tragic. Was this a captain's call not to make the reforms go as far as they were first intended to go?
Look, I think he had a fair degree of influence in it. It's a bit like sort of drinking and other things. Just because some people got a problem with it doesn't mean you ban the whole thing. That's the Prime Minister's attitude, and he said that on Friday last week. But what the sporting codes have done, like especially the NRL and the AFL, they really pushed it, in terms of the saturation of the advertisements and the proliferation of these betting agencies is testament to how many people do bet on sport. So there needed to be a pushback on it, but at the same time the PM didn't want to sort of destroy an entire industry or people's ability to have a flutter on the weekend.
Yeah.
In his mind, he's found a happy medium. But there's no doubt that the likes of Peter V'landys and the Andrew Dillons and the AFL lobbied fairly heavily on this stuff. I don't think the Prime Minister's affinity for NRL was a factor one way or the other. It's just more a pragmatic view.
And so, Phil, where did the government land on this important issue, and does it go far enough?
They landed where they had to land to get it through the Parliament, Lisa. Everyone sort of references back to this thing called the Murphy Report, and that was by the late Labor backbencher Peter Murphy, who's a bit of an up-and-comer, and tragically Peter died of cancer after the report was released. So it's always added a level of emotion to this, do it for Peter, this sort of thing. But I think you'll find the Cabinet sort of distance itself from the emotion. I mean, there's been a lot of committee reports over the years, Lisa, that have had unanimous recommendations. Not many, but this one was unanimous. Labor, Liberal, Greens. Does it go far enough? Goes further than the Prime Minister originally wanted to take it, but doesn't go anywhere near as far as, say, the Murphy Report recommended some of the PM's backbenchers and other anti-gambling advocates wanted it to.
Phil, Canberra's still fixated on Melongate. The Prime Minister has been under fire for comments and hand gestures he made during a podcast interview about 2 melons gifted to him by his Japanese counterpart. Was this a serious lapse of judgment? And how will the government move on from it?
Oh, 100%. It was a shocking lack of judgment.
Got a couple of melons.
She brought 2.
She brought 2, as you do.
Just the name of the podcast, Bush Deep, Lisa, should have been warning enough.
She just came in looking like Pamela Anderson.
She brought 2.
Yes, really.
And they're beautiful.
It's not that subtle. There's nothing subtle or clever about the humour. It's just sort of fairly crass.
Iron knob.
That is real.
Is that what Jodie says?
But the minute it began, when the Prime Minister poured her a glass of whiskey and she said,
I only get double-fingered by the PM.
A clumsy double entendre referring to the measure of whiskey, I think that's where the red flag should have gone up, and the media advisors might have wanted to step in at that stage and say, let's not do this. The thing that grabbed all the attention originally was
Shag, marry, date.
Kylie Minogue, Rhonda Birchmore or Nicole Kidman.
I've just got married. I'm only 6 months in.
But if it goes tits up, let's just pretend.
And then he mentioned about his wife and how, when the football team wins, when the South Sydney football team wins, they get jiggy after that. And then, of course, there was the stuff at the end with the melons. There was a number of lowlights.
What started as a joke about melons is no laughing matter now.
Albanese insists the remarks were not meant to be offensive in any way.
Controversy now with its own hashtag Melongate.
Comedian Nikki Osborne, who did the podcast, told Mark Bouris last week that she just DM'd the PM and he just said, I'll do it. Like, it went straight through the normal filters. Now, politics being what it is now, Lisa, and the media environment being so utterly fragmented that it's not unusual. Prime Ministers, opposition leaders, they're all doing lots of podcasts now because you've got to reach all the different audiences.
Yeah.
That's, I guess, one of the pitfalls now is, where do you draw the line? I mean, for years, they've always done the FM radio stations. That's what Malcolm Turnbull used to call the compulsories. And those things are always laden with risk. You get spot quizzes, and PM sort of sailed pretty close to the breeze a few times doing the likes of the now defunct Kyle and Jackie O. But this was a case where this thing had red flags all over it. I mean, you only had to watch a couple of episodes and say, there's no way. He just sort of went with it and disrespected the office. He disrespected the Japanese Prime Minister. And that's okay in the sense that people make mistakes, right? And he just got himself caught in this thing. He was trying to be cool for the kids. When it blew up immediately afterwards, he just said, I'm sorry, I don't know what I was thinking. It was dumb, and I apologise profusely. Rather than some sort of written apology through his office that was sort of non-specific. And I think the problem for the PM, Lisa, is everyone saw it, everyone knows what they saw, and whether he meant it or not, it's the perception which matters in politics, and he hasn't apologised for it. And then last week we got to this ridiculous sort of level of defence where he was saying, I always talk with my hands. She mentioned Pamela Anderson. I didn't mention Pamela Anderson. I've picked it up especially amongst female readers and female friends, this sort of quiet disdain for that, for what he did. And from all walks of life, rich, poor, migrant women, business women. Whether it's a vote shifter, I don't know. That's a completely different question. But he's certainly been marked down in the eyes of a lot of women I know and a lot of readers have sent me emails. It comes at a really sort of difficult time. As a former China correspondent, Lisa, you would know how important Japan is in the region.
Yeah.
Trump's gone barking mad and completely withdrawn from the Asia-Pacific, at least in a visible sense. And it's always been, since we've had this US isolationism, that the Japanese-Australian relationship has never been more important in terms of holding the line in the Indo-Pacific or the Asia-Pacific.
Yeah.
And the Prime Minister has fallen over himself, and quite rightly, to Duchess the Chinese. He's been there a zillion times. He's never been to Japan, like in a bilateral sense, and they're really upset about it. When the Japanese PM was here, It was pointed out by others, no address to Parliament, very quick visit. Of all the visitors we've had this year, should be the most important. The Japanese are sort of wondering, what have we done wrong? And I guess the thing they're the least upset about is Melongate, because they don't see that as a deliberate slight. They just see that as clumsy and offensive. But it just didn't help that whole vibe. That's why this is not something to be laughed off.
Yeah, and you're right to point out the diplomatic fail in all of this rather than just the poor taste. Phil, it probably wasn't the only lapse in judgment in recent weeks. The Prime Minister was also under fire for attending a private dinner at a Point Piper mansion.
You don't know if it was a lapse in judgment or just getting caught, because they do that stuff all the time. I mean, that's just one of the things, Lisa, politics is expensive and you need donations. As our colleagues in Rear Window exposed, he went to that very intimate dinner at the home of Felix Lee, the Chinese billionaire, 25 years old, whose old man was in all sorts with the tax office. Again, sort of more a problem with that handling of it rather than the offence. When the PM says saying, yeah, you're right, I've got to be a bit more careful about who I have dinner with. Instead, he said, I have dinners all the time, I have dinners all the time. But you build up a pattern of this stuff, and that's where it becomes dangerous politically. I didn't fall off the stage during the election campaign. Well, of course you did, right? We can see it. Remember the Bondi massacre? Mid-January, the PM stood up and said, with Tony Burke, and said, we're not going to have a Royal Commission for all these reasons. And then a week later, when he relented, he said, oh, we're always going to have one. People know what they see and just don't treat them like mugs. You start to build a list, Lisa, it becomes a problem. In isolation, these things are fine, but when you got 2, 3 or 4 or 5 of them, it becomes a problem. And I'll guarantee you there will be ads come election time with these lists on it.
We're talking about the issues facing the Albanese government. Phil, amid the fracas around Melongate, the government is also under pressure to provide more details around its immigration plan. This is shaping up as a huge issue ahead of the next election. The minister responsible, Tony Burke, pulled out of a recent speech that was expected to provide some of those details. What happened there?
Good question. I think what happened is the minister was a little bit too enthusiastic. The Prime Minister was away. He booked himself a speech at the Press Club, took a package to Cabinet and was expecting just to get the sort of the green light. But numerous concerns were raised, ranging from the cost of some of the things he did to the political implications, especially in migrant communities surrounding family reunion and things like that. Cabinet sort of waved it through, but then they have a thing called the Leadership Group, of which Burke is a member, and they said, nah, put the brakes on. Much more work needs to be done on this. So it was meant to be last week, it wasn't. It was meant to be this week, it wasn't. So we're now hearing maybe next week.
Right.
This sort of began with Hanson, if you like, about July last year, where she tapped into the resentment against our high levels of migration. If you go back, I think it was our July poll or our August poll in 2025 in the Redbridge AFR poll, we revealed for the first time that when we ask voters what issues do you trust the parties with, cost of living, health, housing stuff, One Nation jumped ahead as the party most trusted to handle migration. So it was really, that was the fuse was lit then. Then we saw the Liberals under both Susan Lee, then Angus Taylor. Remember Taylor? Everyone seems to forget. He announced at the start of this year they're going to have ICE squads throwing out overstayers, and all sorts of stuff. And they're going to go really low on the numbers. So Labor's got the memo. They know how sensitive it is out there. People are annoyed at the sort of level of our population growth. I mean, not everyone is. The business community, obviously, because they make money from it all. But it's got to the point where it's a real problem. And Pauline Hanson sitting on 31% for a number of reasons, but immigration is key amongst them. So they have to do something, but the trouble is they have such a high immigrant vote, Labor, and even people like Burke have huge migrant seats. So you've got to be really careful and sensitive about how you do it, especially when you start putting curbs on things like family reunions and stuff like that. But they're not talking ambitious here, Lisa. All Labor is saying is they're trying to get the numbers down. We're talking net overseas migration here, to what their forecasts were.
Yeah.
So they wanted to get it down to 245,000 this year, 225,000 next year. It's still running at over 300,000. So they're actually not talking about cutting it. They're just trying to meet their targets. Whereas Hanson and the Liberals are going to go lower. Hanson wants to go to 130,000.
Right.
And the Liberals are looking at around 180,000, so whether it's our poll or other polls, it's now a top 5 issue. You got cost of living, housing, health, and then it's migration.
Yeah.
So they got to respond to it.
So how are they going to respond? Are Cabinet ministers recalibrating and they'll come out with the details soon?
There's not a lot of different ways to do this, Lisa. One Nation and the Coalition have already identified the main problems, if you like, and the main problem is visa overstays. People who come here on temporary work or student visas and then won't go home when those visas expire. They then apply for another visa, they get refused, and in the end they end up applying for asylum, and 10 years later they're still here. There's now something like 3 million of those people in the country. More than 10% of our population are people on temporary visas who won't leave. And even Labor is sort of looking at bolstering the resources of the department to identify these people and chuck them out. They're looking at measures like if you want to reapply for a visa, you've got to go outside the country to do it, so you have to leave. You can't just sit here and reapply. And these are the things that are going to have to be looked at. There's no sort of easy way to do it, and it's going to be controversial, but politics of it will rule the day.
Yeah.
What is happening, as I talk to you, is they are still nuancing all this stuff. And Burke will still stand up at the press club at some stage and announce all this. I wouldn't be surprised if Albanese wants to stand next to him, because this will be a fairly signature policy statement.
And Phil, depending on who you talk to, there has been a backlash against the negative gearing and CGT changes, which are taking some heat out of the housing market, doing what they were intended to do, but which are also proving unpopular among general homeowners who are seeing the value of their asset fall, and also among some business people. Is the government concerned about this pushback following the budget?
If you talk to backbenchers, Lisa, they're more concerned about what they've done to small business sentiment and shares. There's a lot of questioning, why did we go beyond housing? We were trying to fix housing. Why did we apply those CGT changes to all asset classes? That's created unnecessary heartache for voters, people trying to generate wealth, and unnecessary political problems, because housing was the problem they're trying to fix.
Yeah.
Even though house prices are falling, Labor is secretly happy that's the case. They just would never say that publicly, because you don't want to be cheering on people's asset values declining, but they think there's more votes in that than not. And they'll tell you off the record it's a good thing, but you will never say that publicly. Their argument against those who are sort of complaining about negative equity, and the Treasurer makes this argument publicly, is sort of, well, your house will recover. I mean, the whole idea was to stop people buying houses and selling them a year or two later for a quick buck. Chalmers argues if you buy a house, you're going to live in it for a while, so you'll overcome your negative equity, and that's the way they answer that.
And Phil, let's talk about the opposition. Has the Coalition and One Nation managed to capitalise on all of this?
No. I think the opposition's problem here is they've gone too hard on housing and not on the other stuff. A clear case had been made to do something about housing, Lisa. Personally, I think the negative gearing might be a mistake. They may have to revisit what they've done to negative gearing, because eventually you're going to wipe out all rental properties in established suburbs, because if you can only negatively gear a newly built house, every time a rental gets sold, it can never be rented again. But the sort of thrust of what they were trying to do is popular, and where the Coalition really hasn't put a lot of attention is where there's a lot of anger on the startup business sector, kids buying shares, that sort of stuff. They've chosen to attack the most popular element of it, I guess is my criticism, and I don't think they're making huge inroads, to be honest, on the budget.
Yeah.
I think Melon just did its own work. Angus Taylor kicked it along as required, but I mean, people have just made up their own minds about that. Such is the tribal nature of politics. You see all these sort of Labor people on social media, writing it off as a complete beat up and so forth. I'm sure they'd substitute Tony Abbott or Scott Morrison, and the reaction would be completely different. Pauline Hanson is proving to be a lot more formidable than many possibly thought she was going to be, even around Christmas time. So the Coalition's in all sorts. They just can't get out of the mud. They're on 22% of the primary vote. They have to get at least 10% back from One Nation to be any sort of prospect at the next election. People aren't really thinking about how they're going to vote at the moment, Lisa. They're just looking around at what appeals to them. So if you ring them up, or you send them an email from a pollster or something, that's not necessarily how they're going to vote, but it's certainly an indication. But what we're seeing this time, different to previous rises of One Nation, is it's not easy to shift that vote. So, the only way to really tackle One Nation is on substance, policy substance, question their ability to actually deliver what they say they will, pull it apart on economic grounds, also while being utterly respectful of people for wanting to vote for Hanson and of Hanson herself, because you do a deplorables act, you're going to lose them forever. And that worked for John Howard in the late 90s. It's the same template both parties are using now, but people are just so annoyed. They don't sort of care at the moment. They don't really care about her policies if they don't stack up. They're just enjoying the disruption of it all at the moment. And that's the challenge for the major parties, is to sort of get beyond disruption is fun, but that ain't going to fix your problems. But at the moment, she's a lightning rod for a lot of discontent. People will start taking it more seriously, in another 6 months' time.
Yeah.
But if she's still at 31% this time next year in the polls, then it's got to be very interesting.
So, Phil, let's end where we began. Albanese may be the third longest serving Labor Prime Minister. Do you think he'll be able to sell this message of steadiness and stability going into the next election?
Well, you work with what you got, right? Of all their attributes, that's probably one of their best ones at the moment. I think it will be supplemented by lots of spending, Lisa. They sort of spent like Billy O to win the last election. They've shown no sign of stopping since. People at the moment still don't care. They don't care about debt and deficit.
Yeah.
At this moment, I think they're just going to keep doing what they're doing. I mean, I don't think we've seen the last of, the travails inside the Liberal Party. Again, if it's this time next year and their numbers are still the same, then Angus Taylor, if he's still here, will come under enormous pressure. I think they've still got one more leadership spill in them, and everyone knows that. No one's going to go to an election on a 20% primary vote. So, still to play out. What he says, he's up to his 5th British Prime Minister, his 3rd Japanese Prime Minister. You only got to go back not too recently in Australian political history where we had 6 Prime Ministers in 8 years, if you count Kevin Rudd twice. So 4 years and a bit. Didn't used to be that impressive, but now it's sort of a bit of a miracle Prime Ministers lasted that long. So they will be using that a lot going into the next election, especially when you've got this 3-way split on the Conservative vote between One Nation, the Liberals and the Nationals. But Albanese's key message to his troops throughout this will be the grown-ups, be the stable ones, because it will be of enormous benefit.
Thanks, Phil.
No worries, Liz. Always a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to The Fin. If you want to read more about what's happening in Canberra, check out the show notes. And don't forget, you can listen to all Financial Review podcasts on the AFR app. The Fin is produced by Mandy Coulin. Fiona Buffini is head of premium content. Our theme is by Alex Gow. For more stories about markets, business and power, subscribe to the Financial Review at afr.com/subscribe. I'm Lisa Murray. See you next week.
The Australian Financial Review.